Hi guys.
There we go. We're on now.
I think it was maybe the do not disturb thing, so
Okay,
we may get disturbed during this. But hi guys. So hopefully that doesn't cause any issues that I put do not disturb on. I'm trying that because we're doing it through my phone today instead of our normal studio cameras. So we want to talk about this issue. It's very important. We've seen far too many people have been gaslighted into this idea that at the border we're just tossing kids in cages, locking them up, locking them away, and then sometimes we just lose them. And I want to be very clear and concise about this because I want you guys to be able to send this to your friends, to your family, to community leaders, people who may have bought into this lie. Because I will say this about them, they're not dumb for believing the lie, because the amount that the mainstream media has sort of convoluted this and twisted it into something that it's not is very, I mean, it's really great propaganda. It is. But I want to be very clear about a few things. First, I want to start with the fact that our Border Patrol agents are over half Hispanic. Okay, so I want you to start there with the idea that people that are making these decisions on a day-to-day basis are in fact themselves Hispanic. And this is one of the big frustrations I've heard from agents and people on the ground, is that like, these kids look like my kids. And so the idea that I would just be throwing them in cages is disgusting to me. You know, so I want to be very clear about that. We have no dog cages at the border. There's nothing like that. There are open enclosures that basically they were made the way they're made so that people can see inside of them. These are temporary detention facilities. These are not where you go to be held long term. These are temporary places where we figure things out. Now, in terms of separations, this is something that Obama did as well. And I say that actually to give credit to Obama, because there's very few things I'll give him credit for. But when he did something right, I'll give credit. And in this case, what he did separating, that the Trump administration has also done I'd say they took it up a notch, is separating to ensure that children are not with traffickers. So I want to be very clear about that, because there are thousands of kids and women trafficked at the border. And the only way to separate them from their trafficker, the trafficker obviously pretends that the child is with them or that the woman is with them. And the only way to get around that is to separate the victim from their trafficker. Question them separately about key things, birthdays, family members, things like that. You match their answers against each other, see if they're telling the truth. Then you do DNA testing to see if their DNA matches, because some of the traffickers and smugglers are kind of woke and they know there's going to be these questions. So they cross-collaborate by asking questions on the trip over to the people that they're trafficking. Okay,
and just to give you an idea of how extreme the lengths that these people will go is in one case they had a child where the adult came with them, the trafficker spit in their mouth because they thought that if they could do a swab, that would somehow manipulate the DNA to confirm that they were together.
Yes.
And the role of the United States, first and foremost, when you're dealing with a minor, is to follow a certain protocol, which includes the number one priority is making sure that they are safe. Not that they are with their parent and they feel good and they feel safe with their
emotional
parent,
safety,
but safe from traffickers.
Which
that
is
the
sad.
number one. The whole situation is sad, and that's why this is such a difficult conversation to have on Twitter, and it's deserving of a long form discussion because it is so complex. And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off because you were going on something else, but I feel like we need to explain why we have a crisis, a manufactured crisis at the border. And
well, if you want to get into manufactured crisis, I can go right in. So I'm going to look down a little bit here because I want to be completely accurate. I'm going to break down for you exactly what happens and what one of our big problems is. So at the border, we have a capacity issue, okay? There are too many illegal immigrants coming in. This leads to a lot of the conditions that we hear about that we say, oh, those are not good conditions. And are there cases where there are conditions that could be better? Absolutely. And DHS does not deny this. In
fact, it's not due to a moral thing.
DHS and Border Patrol have asked repeatedly for Congress to give them more funding. They know that they want things to be better. Our DHS wants things to improve. They want conditions to improve. But if they don't have the money from Congress to do it, they can't do it. Who's in control of Congress? The Democrats. Now, let's figure out, why is capacity at issue here? Why are we at such high capacity that we can't handle the number of migrants coming in? Here's why. We have groups like Pueblos Sin Fronteras. Okay, if you've never heard of them, they're basically an open borders group. Okay, Pueblos Sin Fronteras was looked into by Capital Research Group. They found that Pueblos Sin Fronteras, they started a subgroup called La Familia Latina Unidas. That group then worked with Cara family detention pro bono project. Okay. They do this funneling to hide money and who's behind it. Okay. But I'm going through this whole thing. So we've got 3 subgroups so far. Now, Kara they have 4 members. 3 out of the 4 members receive significant funding from the Foundation to Promote Open Society. Now, what is Foundation to Open Society? Foundation to Promote Open Society is a component of Open Societies. Open Societies is George Soros's group, okay? So you have these groups like Pueblos Sin Fronteras down there, and they're encouraging migrants to join caravans, basically under the idea that, hey, in these raw numbers, they can't turn everybody away. They know that there is going to be abuse on the way. They know there's going to be difficulty on the way. In fact, 1 out of every 3 women who come across the border have been raped. Okay, that's just a fact. And so you need to understand these facts. If you're an immigration voter that originally, let's say, voted for Trump in 2016, and this issue is the reason why you've turned away because you feel like he's just thrown kids in cages, you need to get the facts. You need to understand the nuance here. And yes, I am Latino, okay? If I thought, and I want to be very clear about this, if I thought there were little Latino kids at our border being thrown in dog cages and not being fed, not being taken care of, that were just being treated like absolute dirt, stolen from their parents and never to be returned, I would be down there. I would be down there and I would be causing all hell. Okay? That is not what is happening down there.
And my question is, if that's really what these people believe on the left, why aren't they down there too? If you're a mother and you genuinely believe that Trump has put children in cages, or that our DHS and all of our Border Patrol are complicit in this conspiracy theory to lock children in cages, then why is that not your issue that you're advocating for? Why are you not down at the border? So it's one of 2 things. You either believe it and you're doing nothing about it morally, or you know it's a lie and you're peddling this lie because you care more about making Trump look like he's not a good president, like he's not doing anything on this issue, than you care about helping this issue. And we need to talk about the demand here with human trafficking. Okay, who is the party? I'm old enough to remember when the left was advocating for open borders. Are you? Okay, open borders equals open trafficking, the open pipeline of trafficking. So not only that, but they have people on the left, including media, including elected Democrats and these legal defense attorneys, all of these people advocating for these immigrants. And they're telling them to come across the border, incentivizing them, encouraging them, counseling them on how to bypass the legal asylum system, okay, with no intention whatsoever of helping them when they get on the other side. That is moral bankruptcy. It's completely inhumane. It's irresponsible. And the thing is when these children and mothers and these people that they're encouraging to come across for the American dream, it ends up becoming an American nightmare for them, because on their journey over here, they're more likely to be raped, they're more likely to be trafficked, and they're more likely to be separated and put into a system that is inundated and is a mess. We were never designed to have a functional inundated immigration system. We were designed to have a legal immigration system. So the fact that Democrats have been advocating for open borders and have been incentivizing and encouraging through these illegal pipelines to have people come here illegally under a false precedent and coercion involved, it tells me that they are fomenting human trafficking, that they are participating in this narrative that is false and that has resulted in the deaths, rapes, and trafficking of so many individuals, because they're manufacturing a crisis that need not be at our border.
Not to mention their refusal to give more funding.
Absolutely. To accommodate this crisis. So, and then what does the media do? They fail. I mean, firsthand, they fail to cover anything of what this administration has done. And whether they like Trump or not, that's not their job as media and journalists. Their job is to report accurately what is happening in our country. And instead, they've run these propaganda pieces going after Trump. They've called him a trafficker. They've called him a pedo. They've called him all sorts of unsubstantiated names and things like that. And they have not covered this what's happening at the border accurately at all.
I'm going to jump in real quick. I want to cover one thing really fast, unrelated. We're going to get right back into the next issue I want to cover is missing children. Okay, so I'm going to go into that. I saw somebody who I assume is a Democrat ask about that, and I want to address it because it's very important. First, though, I want to just get something across real quick. I had somebody, and this isn't the first time, this happened many times, accuse me as a Latino of being whitewashed by being married to a white woman who has somehow taken control of my mind and convinced me to have a certain view on immigration. I want to make something very clear. I'm actually harder on immigration than my wife is. My wife is actually softer on immigration than I am. Sorry, but you are. I'm much harder on immigration.
No,
I
I'm
always
softer
have been.
on legal immigration. On
I
pathways
no,
for
I'm cool with legal immigration. I believe in merit-based legal immigration. Okay, but we have, I would say, you're more easily pulled at the heartstrings than I am.
We're sidetracking.
Anyways, I just want to make that very clear for anybody who's out there who's a racist who thinks that white people can control the minds of Latinos if they're married to them or something like that. She's not able to control my mind. In fact, I think we just disagreed probably about an hour ago about an issue. So I don't know where that comes from. I assume it's your own latent internal racism. I encourage you to look in the mirror and examine that on in your own mind, why you think that minorities can be controlled by white people. But I don't. I think more highly of everybody. So jumping into missing children. Okay, very serious topic. So this is a hot one right now because an immigration legal group is again pushing the idea that there is just all of these missing kids who we have no idea where they are. So I want to explain this, okay, very, very, very clearly. And if you have questions, go ahead and type them in. I will answer them because I want this to be 100% clear, okay? So here's what happens. If a child comes into the country, okay, there's multiple ways they come in. They can come in alone with a phone number on them, okay? Those are called unaccompanied minors, okay? Not even every single child that comes through has a phone number on them, but in many cases on their shirt, a name and phone number is written on, okay? Now, in other cases, they come over with an adult. Let's pretend in one scenario it's a trafficker, in one scenario it's a family member, okay? So we have to treat each one of these differently. So we're gonna go with trafficker first, okay? With the trafficker situation, they come in with a trafficker, there's a child, okay? We arrest the trafficker, the child is there left in our custody then. We make every attempt to figure out where that child is from and attempt to reach their consulate, attempt to see if there's any missing children. We do those things and try to find out. If we can't, though, and the child needs to move on from temporary detention to long-term detention, we eventually move on to foster care because the child deserves the warm nature of having a family. Now, is the foster care system perfect? Absolutely not. And we've covered that on this show.
We don't want them in the foster care system.
We would prefer to reform that system.
Absolutely.
But that is what our system is right now, and it takes an act of Congress to change that. So as far as where we're at right now, that child then ends up in foster care, and you could say that they're separated from their parent forever, but they're not. In terms of missing, though, if that foster family that we have placed them with is not responding to the federal government, at the end of the day, foster care programs run through the state. So they need to respond to the state program where they're getting their money, or nothing happens. And in many cases, there's a million different reasons why they may not be responding to the feds, but that doesn't mean the child is actually like a missing child, okay? It's just marked as a child they have not made contact with. The state may full well have contact, and that's another scenario we have to go through and then go to the state. There's a lot of branches on this tree that you have to go down and run down to make sure that every case is individually treated correctly.
None of it.
They don't go into the nuance of this. So let's go into the second scenario. A parent comes with a child and they're separated at the time there. And we do all those things. We do the DNA test, we do the interview, we reach out to the consulate. DNA is good, interview is good, but then the consulate comes back and says they're wanted in that country for a crime. We then have to keep the child here and try to repatriate them, okay, to somebody who they can be repatriated to. But what happens when the family there refuses repatriation and they say, we don't want to take the child back? Believe it or not, that happens more than you would like to believe. And when that happens, we try to place them with a family member first in the United States. So that if they get placed with a family member in the United States, which is the vast majority of the missing children cases, is children who are placed with a family member here in the United States, okay? That family member then does not respond to the feds after they try to make contact to check in on the child for a very specific reason. Because in many cases, there is other people who have a legal status living at that home, or the parent of that child plans in the future to illegally come into the country and meet up with their child and have, live in that place. So they don't always have the location, the, whereabouts of each child because of that scenario. Now, this is what the media doesn't tell you. It's a lot flashier just to have a headline and say there's 553 missing kids, but it's not wholly accurate because we place these kids with family members in almost every case. And in the few cases with foster cares, I explain those. Okay. So, I think that gets through a lot of the missing children sort of propaganda that's out there.
Rhetoric.
But
again, this is not, we don't want this, okay? Our foster care system is a disaster. We don't want these children in foster care. We don't want them here when there's nobody to advocate for them, provide them health care, food, assistance, jobs for their parents, none of that. So the whole idea here is this idea of open borders, or having a, inefficient immigration system where people are being instructed to bypass legal asylum laws, things like that, and they're overrunning it. Okay, that is fomenting human trafficking. It's fomenting all of these problems that we're seeing and hurting children. So it's very sensational to say, oh, what about the kids in the cages, or what about the kids at the border? But nobody's talking about who's bringing them over here, who's advocating for that. It's these Democrats who are standing on this policy of open borders, which they seem to have abandoned. They flip their positions so often that it's difficult to keep up. But I'm old enough, like I said, to remember when they were advocating for this. And then we saw funnels of people. Do you guys remember watching the news where we saw funnels of people in these countries, vulnerable people, caravans being brought into our country, inundating our border patrol? They could not keep up with it, and that's the problem. And then what do? Is they make it Donald Trump's problem. They run puff pieces,
on all the immigration groups. Like Pueblos Sin Fronteras has been given amazing press coverage. We have
celebrities talking about how kids were crying, being ripped away from their parents. We even had media use false images. Do you remember? Like,
I was actually going to get into this.
Staging, emotional manipulation. This is the thing. It is sad. The whole situation is sad. And the solution is that we cannot incentivize or encourage people to come, vulnerable people, to come to our country illegally, because it is dangerous. They will get hurt. They can get killed. They can get raped. And the worst possible thing we could do is encourage that. And what do Democrats do? They incessantly get on their platforms and talk about how inhumane it is that we aren't open borders, how inhumane that we're not helping the illegals. We cannot even help ourselves. It's about morality. It's about taking care of your own home first.
We have millions of black children in America living in poverty right now. And if Black Lives Matter to Democrats, we would put those kids first because they're American citizens. But I want to cover something real quick.
What about
somebody said Obama built the facilities but never separated kids from their parents. That is absolutely false. In fact, the very first viral pictures that went out that the Democrats at the Twitter account at the Democrats posted, hold on, I got another one there, that at the Democrats posted was actually a photo from the Obama era. You can go to Snopes.com, which is a left-wing fact-checking website, and search Obama kids in cages. And it will show you the photos that are from Obama era with Jay Johnson, his head of Department of Homeland Security, there. I also, to make a note, we are going to have a guest from Department of Homeland Security on next week who we are going to go deep into these issues with to clear up any misconceptions. But this has just been... I've seen it spreading so much, and Landon's been seeing it spread so much that we needed to say something even ahead of that DHS interview to clarify these points, because we're right up next to an election, and it is not fair to have these issues judged on the propaganda of the media who does not go into the nuance of these issues. And to be clear on Obama doing those separations at the time when he was in office, I support what he did, because it was one of the few things I'll give him credit that was an action that would lessen trafficking. Now, what I would criticize them for in the Obama admin is they did, in fact, place children with people who ended up being human traffickers. And that's a whole other story that left-wing media, actually, I will give credit. It was, I think, Mother Jones covered. They covered it and went in depth on it, and it was a failure within the way that they vetted the people they were giving the kids to. And this is why our system now is much more stringent in terms of the interviews, the DNA, and the way we work with consulates and all that. So somebody else asked, though, they said, aren't there illegal immigrants buying children so they can stay in the U.S. by posing as their parents? Yes, that does in fact happen, and that is a form of trafficking. So that's part of the trafficking cases, is that cartel members and gang members outside of cartels, and sometimes just, everyday criminals have done this, where they've bought kids or they've kidnapped kids in Mexico, Central America, and then they pass them off as their own child. And that is why our system is very, very hard on this now. There's no easy way to protect these kids. I think the easiest way to protect them is, like Landon's been saying, is for Democrats to stop incentivizing them to come and giving them the idea that this is a golden ticket.
Having strong borders, because that's a thing. If they know they can't get through, this no longer is an industry.
Yeah.
It's very simple. You stop the demand. If there's no demand, there's no way to get through. It's a closed pipeline for trafficking. Then they have to figure out other means of exploitation, and they'll go back to just guns and drugs, which is sad, but it's way better than little children and human beings. So that's the problem. It's not a happy situation, but life is not happy and rosy all the time. And we have to look at things realistically and make these hard decisions. But we have to disincentivize people to cross this border because it is so dangerous. And Democrats do not speak on this issue. They do not warn them when they're telling them to come for the American dream, that they deserve the American dream. They use this utopic language, and it's falsely colluding to get them to come here, and with no intention, again, no intention of helping them. Not one of these people is opening their homes, their wallets, their refrigerators for these people to help them. And then they're now dependent on the system, which is already overrun. We already have homelessness crises. We have child sexual exploitation crises, which have only escalate. There's a reason that the bordering states, Arizona, Texas, California, have the most calls into the National Center for Childhood Exploitation for trafficking reporting, for exploitation reporting. And it's because people need to understand trafficking just isn't about the crime. Sometimes we get fixated on these numbers of like how many people were trafficked over the border. But what we're not including is that number we will never know, because so many of these names are faceless. When you have undocumented people, you no longer can control crimes that are happening because those people that are victims don't exist. You can't account for it. People get lost in the statistics. So what we need to understand is when people are trafficked, they are more likely to be trafficked once they're here because of their vulnerability. Traffickers go after people that are vulnerable, which means these people that are living in poverty, they're living in homelessness, they're living in affordable housing that is inundated, they have no access to health care, and they will strike on that. They will capitalize on that. And exploit those vulnerabilities that they see. They will wait across the border for even the ones that make it over here. People do not understand this issue. So
yeah, you need to understand too the difference between organized crime and non-organized crime. So a lot of the organized crime that happens, like she's saying, numbers that you're never going to get are, you look at what cartels do. They actually have tunneling systems into the United States. You've probably seen this in the news before, where San Diego police or border patrol will find a tunnel system that led to a gas station or led to a building somewhere that was abandoned, and that's an entry point for them. So that tunnel goes all the way from Mexico to the other side of the border in San Diego. And they'll funnel not just drugs through there, but people, children, and those are trafficked children. So part of the trafficking problem is forced labor, where the person they're trafficking in owes them, let's say, $30,000. That becomes impossible to pay off. Number one, because the person is not a legal citizen, so the work that they're getting is going to be under the table. And beyond that, there's growing interest on this. It's a loan shark loan, essentially. So it's something they can never work their way out of. I know 30,000 doesn't sound crazy to a lot of people, but it is to these people who come here with nothing. And so that's one way, is through forced labor. They're exploited and trafficked. Another way they do it is actually through just direct sex trafficking, where they're selling them for sex, or they're using them within their own criminal enterprise as a sex object.
There's also a false idea that children coming across, they're all just coming for a better life, and that there's a leftist author that said something about this that it really upset me, because again, this is what teaches these liberal women these lies that they end up perpetuating. And it's this idea that what kind of mother would send their kids over? Only mothers that love their kids enough to send them on this treacherous journey for a better life. Again, this is the language I'm talking about, because the better life is a false lie. They're not going to have a better life here when they're being trafficked and exploited, and there's no resources available to take care of them. And you, the millionaire author, have no intention of bringing them into your $1 million home and taking care of them. So this is just false promises, hollow morality. And it's got to stop, because that's what's eliciting this more of this false migration promises.
I want to wrap it up pretty quick here, but I want to note there's somebody on Periscope saying they're a border agent, and that half of what we're saying isn't true. Their name is Dre Notes. Dre Notes, go ahead and send me proof you're a border agent, because we just have been speaking with DHS this week, and DHS, one of their key leaders at DHS coming on our show next week.
We've spoken with border agents.
Everything we're saying is factual. We've spoken with border agents.
We don't come up with
DHS.
this. We don't get our information from
CNN. So
CNN
I would be willing to bet a good deal of money you are not a border agent. You're a leftist troll who is on here trying to discredit what we're saying because you know how effective it is for us to break through the lies and to tell people the reality of what's going on there. Because nuance may not sell clicks at CNN. It may not help get Biden elected, but it's what people deserve. They deserve to know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And that is why we're not hiding. You know, we said at the very beginning of this, there are parts of our immigration system that are irreparably broken. There are conditions that should be improved, and DHS does not pretend that that is not the case. They are asking for the money to improve those things, but it is Congress, Nancy Pelosi, who's refusing to give them the money they need to improve conditions, to improve things, to be more streamlined. Somebody else, I want to end this on a positive note. Somebody asked, what is the solution? That person was trying to find their name. Sorry, I missed you. The comments go really fast, so I missed your name. But somebody asked, you know, how do we fix this? And the way we fix this is, you know, I want to be realistic here. The realistic thing is we need the Republicans to have a majority to be able to effectively fix it. And I don't know that that's going to happen in this election. I think that our best case scenario is Trump being reelected, the Senate being Republican, but the House still being Democrat, which is going to make it very difficult because everything is transactional with them. And they want to have this give and take where a lot of what they want us to give to them are things that are not good for our immigration system. So there's not a magic answer. If we got to a point, and this is one of my criticisms of Paul Ryan and Republicans, I'm very open criticizing people who I think did a bad job. And Paul Ryan, a Republican who is now gone, he did a bad job because this should have been a priority in 2016 to totally reform the immigration system, make new rules, and that be that. Okay. But now that we're at the place we're at now, you know, we have to have pragmatic sort of change. We have to put pressure on elected leaders to give the funding necessary for DHS to do their job. That's the most pragmatic thing we can do at this point until we have a Republican majority in the House, Senate, and White House. At that point, if we do get that, if we're lucky enough to get that, we need to take that mandate to change the immigration system once and for all, completely overhaul our legal system. And we need to invest in technologies that are going to be, you know, able to catch these criminal behaviors happening before they happen and be more effective at them. We also need to do much more work to disincentivize illegal immigration and incentivize legal immigration. Right. So the byproduct of fixing illegal immigration and having a wall that works that a lot of people don't understand is that if you are able to slow down illegal immigration to a point where we do not need the resources that we throw at it now, you are then able to move resources over to our legal immigration system and process legal immigration more quickly and make it more efficient. So those are the things I wish we could focus on, just how we fix legal immigration, but unfortunately we have to fix
You're never going to fix the legal immigration system, and that's so unfortunate for so many people that want to be here and have that American dream through the legal right process. But you can't even get to those people because this other illegal trade and process is happening. And I would blame Trump if he was the one calling for open borders and he was the one incentivizing this mass migration across our borders, our porous borders. If he was not advocating for strong borders and the wall, I would be blaming Trump. But he's not the one who did that. Ask yourself, who has been advocating for this? Who is telling these vulnerable people to come across our borders with no intention of helping them?
I just want to note that the guy who was pretending to be a border agent, one of our great followers, went ahead and did a little research, found they live in Vegas. And Nevada, I hate to break to you, is not a border state. We don't have a large human trafficking or illegal immigration issue from the southern border that is nowhere near Nevada's border. Are there border agents in Nevada? Yes, but very, very few, and they don't deal with these issues. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and you know what sucks? It really sucks to have to be like, oh, Democrats did this or Republicans did this. I don't want this to be that kind of issue. But the reality is you have to decide whether or not to speak truth or not. So, you know, if it was Republicans saying, oh, open borders are fine, I would say, no, Republicans, you are wrong. Whoever it is, I don't care what your label is. I don't care what my label is. it is wrong or it is right. And that is the situation. And again, if it's Democrats that said, no, we want to close the borders, we want strong borders, I'd say Democrats are right. Who's incentivizing this illegal immigration?
Yeah,
okay,
but
you
they're
hold
not.
the right people accountable. And people want to say, oh, there's a fire in my house. It's Trump's fault. Everything is Trump's fault. They do not understand civics. They do not understand how our country works and operates. You cannot blame everything on Trump. You have to do the work. We have to go. Okay.
We got to go. Love you guys. We wanted to put this out now. We'll give you guys advance notice for when we have somebody from DHS coming on, but make sure you tune in tomorrow. We have Dennis Prager, the great Dennis Prager, who started PragerU, coming on our show tomorrow, 2 o'clock, right?
I don't know.
Hold on. We're going to double check that. I think it's 2. It might be 1.
I don't even know what time we're on show.
But we're in Central Time. Well, it's confusing.
2 o'clock Central.
2 o'clock Central. So I did know the time. She did not, so blame her. 2 o'clock Central tomorrow, Dennis Prager. We'll have him on for 40 minutes or so and dive into the issues. We're going to talk about left-wing attacks on PragerU and how they're trying to bring it down, how they're trying to, bring up a competitor now that is just ridiculous, the way they're doing it. It's super trashy. But we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the election. We're going to talk about the future of America, how he sees things ending up in 15, 20 years. And we're going to talk about his great work that he's doing. So if you could join us tomorrow too, that'd be awesome. And if you have any questions, at us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, anywhere. And we always try to take a couple questions from our viewers and get them into the mix so that your guys' voices are heard, because at the end of the day, that's why we do this, is to give a voice to everyday people and to ask the questions that we hear people talking about. So a large portion of our questions are already things we've heard people ask about. But if you ever have a specific question, reach out at us, however you want to do it. And we try to at least take some questions here and there from people. If you want to support the show, go to growuplive.com. There's a store, there's a support link, stuff like that. It helps us with booking guests, paying technical people, all that stuff. We don't make money off of it. It just helps kind of offset costs that we already have that we pay ourselves. So thank you. Awesome. I love all the shirts that I've been seeing from you guys wearing that you guys sent to us. If you buy a shirt, you DM us, you in the shirt, a tweet you posted or Instagram you posted, we repost it. And that's my spiel. Was that good? I feel like that was okay. Yeah. All right. Bye, guys.